Enjoy this 2-hour compilation of scary stories.
Welcome to our channel, where we explore the mysterious and scary. Today, we have a special treat for you as we goes into the world of terrifying tales. These spine-chilling stories will keep you up at night and make you question what lurks in the shadows. Our first stories begin. Our house has 2 stories and a basement. Playing video games one day in the basement. My mother was in her second-floor room. My mother abruptly entered the basement and asked if I had opened the door for a white woman since she was sitting on the couch in our living room. I then informed my mother that I had forgotten. My mother will see the white woman today because she is her new case manager. I overlooked the appointment. However, my mother and I both said that we didn't open the door for anyone. There were only 2 of us in the house that morning, so who did? We climbed the stairs to the first floor and greeted the white woman. When the door was opened for her, we asked her who it was. She claimed that a young boy had already opened the door for her while she was waiting on the couch. She replied that the young boy opened the door for her and then closed it after entering a room when we asked her about the young boy. She pointed to a door that leads to a small storage room or closet when we inquired which room it was. We opened it when it wasn't occupied with my mother and I. The white woman fled silently after becoming alarmed at what she saw. My mother then received a new case manager. We don't know what happened to the new case manager. It's peculiar. I remember a time when this happened. My grandpa and I were returning from the store one day, and I recollect walking in front to open the door. My grandfather, who used a cane to walk, was following me. I went to put the grocery in the dining, and I heard something at the door. When I turned around to take another look, I noticed my grandpa rushing across the room as if he were about to collapse. He went to the door with the stairway leading to the basement. In the basement, my grandfather had a fall. When I got to him, my grandpa already blacked out. I asked him if he remembered what happened when he woke up, and he replied that he saw a young boy push him as soon as he entered the house. Our grandfather was taken to the hospital by us. After that fall, he was never able to leave the hospital and ultimately passed away. He is already a very old man. Consider falling into the cellar. My grandfather was only supposedly seeing things, I assumed. Then I didn't think he was real. Now, though, I think our home is home to a young boy, but he never takes any action to frighten us. Now to our second scary stories. I moved into an apartment with my cousin Jim, his girlfriend, and her younger sister Jenny while attending Fresno State. Since the apartment only had 2 bedrooms, Jim and his girlfriend occupied one, and Jenny occupied the other. I therefore spend the night in the living room because I only travel there for school and return on Friday. When I first arrived, Jim was leaving for work. Jenny is already at work, and neither he nor his girlfriend will return until close to 11 o'clock. I can still recall how uneasy I felt in that apartment after Jim left. It was like I wasn't alone there. It's one of those apartments with the tall oak trees surrounding it, so the interior is somewhat dark. 2 cabinets were open when I entered the kitchen. I can still remember that. I figured they might have simply forgotten to shut them, simply closing it with a push. They each return to their homes and turn around 11:00 p.m. Although I was nearly finished, I was still studying for my class. I was doing some research that evening in the living room. Jim and his girlfriend were watching TV in their room. Jenny is inside her bedroom. The only light on is in the living room. The rest are all off. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the dining room. The dining room was empty when I would occasionally glance there. I turned off the light when I was done studying, and now it is completely dark. On the couch, I curled up and pulled the blanket around me. I heard the cabinets in the dining room and kitchen open as I was just about to nod off. But at this point, I am unable to move. I then heard crawling coming from the dining room in the direction I was facing, and before I knew it, I felt it under my blanket. The blanket is buckling up, as I can see. A weight is pressing down on me. It seems to be a young child. It's not heavy, but once it's on me, I can't move and it's difficult to breathe. I know it was on my chest even though it never emerged from the blanket. I never get to see what that thing looks like. I don't get sat on very frequently. While residing there with them, perhaps just once or twice a week, it started coming almost every night after about a month, at which point I started to feel stronger against it. I can only move a little bit until I hear the cabinet open. My brain is still wide awake even though I can't open my eyes. I tried to wake up and move my body when I heard the cabinet open, but I was unable to. I made an attempt to scream, but I'm unsure if I succeeded. As soon as I felt a hand on my shoulder, I seized it firmly. Jenny was there when I opened my eyes. She admitted to me that she was thirsty and came to get some water when she overheard me groaning. She was simply checking on me to see how I was doing. I confessed to her that I have no idea why I have been repeatedly sat on since moving in. We heard something in the dining room at that precise moment. I pulled out my phone and pointed my flashlight at it. Jenny and I caught a glimpse of an elderly woman's face hiding behind the kitchen island. I dragged my blanket behind me as I followed Jenny to her bedroom as she fled. Since she didn't mind, I'll sleep on the floor in her room since we are both scared. She claimed not to care. I spent that night dozing off on the carpet. I kind of just drive to school every day after that experience. It took me about an hour and 30 minutes to get there because I live in Turlock. Jenny, however, replied that she hasn't heard or experienced anything after that when I texted her about it. Now to our last scary stories. My leukemia diagnosis came when I was a young child. When that occurred, I was 8 years old. The harsh punishments stick in my mind. I became so ill from it that I frequently found myself at the children's hospital. I can still picture the time I woke up at 2 in the morning to find 2 young girls sitting by my bed. They resemble one another. When I opened my eyes, the 2 girls had fled and were leaving through the door. When I turned to look at my mother, she was on the couch in my hospital room, dozing off on her side. I slowly stood up and left the room, following the 2 young girls. They are laughing and running in front of me as I speak. They were sticking their heads out of one of the rooms toward the end of the hallway as I continued to follow them. They were still having fun and laughing. The 2 girls' room was number 27, which I discovered as I neared the end of the hallway. After room 27, the hallway continued for a few more rooms. There is an elevator at the end. When I entered room 27, I noticed a sizable dark figure. His entire body is covered in black, including his back and face. The object is hairless. He was holding hands with 2 young ladies who were grinning at me. The shadowy man let go of the girl's hands and slowly walked over to me, placing both of his hands on my shoulders and putting his face very close to mine. He had no mouth, but there was smoke coming from his dark eyes. His 2 hands squeeze my shoulder tighter and tighter, and it begins to hurt, so I scream and woke up. The person who attempted to wake me up was my nurse, who put her hands on my shoulder. She worriedly asked if I was okay after I briefly stopped breathing. I assured her that I'm fine. I woke up at 7 a.m. and heard 2 nurses chatting outside my room. Still sleeping, my mother. The 2 nurses were speaking to each other when I overheard them and learned that the twin girls who were killed along with their parents in a car accident last night had passed away. My entire body started to tingle. It was extremely strange. I know I was just dreaming, but it feels so real when I saw the 2 twins. I was diagnosed with leukemia as a child. However, for us kids, if caught early, we typically recovered from it. I was relieved to be healthy today because I recall how ill I was as a child. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing these stories. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had any such experiences. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.
Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little scary. I decided to take a trip back to my hometown in Minnesota and stay with my family for a while. In this video, I'm going to take you along with me as I explore my mother's new house in an older part of town. It's a two-story brick home with a lot of character and charm, but there's something eerie and unsettling about it that I can't quite put my finger on. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Let's get started. I found myself tired of my surrounding and a little homesick. I quickly packed up and made the 2.5-hour drive to my mother's house in Minnesota. The thought of moving back in with my family wasn't very thrilling, but I needed it. So without further hesitation, I adhered to the idea. My mother had recently moved to this new house I've never seen. It was on the edge of town and had more rooms supposedly. I drove through downtown St. Paul and headed into an older part of town. The houses looked like they each had a story to tell. The neighborhood seemed dark and dreary, but it felt like home. My GPS guided me to the front of a 2-story brick home with red shutters. A large maple tree in front of the house blocked out any light as the branches stretched out over the roof and hovered over the windows. I took a deep breath, shut off the car, and headed out. This was home. I made my way up the chipped cement stairs, dragging my luggage behind me. I reached for the handle and pushed open the fence. It let out a squeak as it swung open. I walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. I looked around the yard, and it was overgrown with weeds. The grass looked like it hadn't been mowed in weeks. I would have thought the house to be abandoned had it not been for my mother's familiar gardening tools laying about. I heard a familiar voice yell out, "Who is it?" And I replied, "It's me, Mom." She opened the door and let me in. I walked in and my siblings greeted me with excitement in their little eyes. It had been close to a year since I've seen them. We said our hellos, and my mom asked me if I wanted the upstairs bedroom or the downstairs bedroom. I learned that everyone slept upstairs and I quickly chose the downstairs bedroom. I grabbed my stuff and headed downstairs. The room was in the basement. Of course it was a finished basement. Who'd sleep in a dungeon, right? I picked the bigger room. There was already a bed set up, and I dropped my stuff and fell onto the bed and fell asleep. When I finally woke up, it was getting dark. I looked around the room and forgot for a minute where I was. It was cold in the room. My feet were freezing. Then I heard giggling coming from the doorway. A quiet, little giggle. My heart started racing. Everything was dark down here. There was no one here with me. Was I losing my mind and hearing things? I laid still, afraid to move. To breathe. Be quiet. There it was. I wasn't crazy. There was definitely someone outside my door. I grabbed my cell phone and flipped it open, so I had some light. I took a deep breath and sprung out of bed and ran for the wall where the light switch was. I flipped it on and frantically searched the room with my eyes. No one. I looked towards the doorway, and the door was opened ajar. I could see 2 little shadows outside. I slowly approached the door and reached out for the doorknob. Boom. 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 My heart was beating out of my chest. I swallowed the lump in my throat and swung the door open. Then I saw them. 2 little girls crouching behind the door, my little sisters. When the door swung open, I could see the fright in their little eyes. They were both startled and fell back. My God. What are you guys doing sneaking around? I screamed at them. They pointed at each other. One blaming the other. It wasn't me. It was Sarah, yelled Laura. Lies, screamed Sarah. Relieved, I dismissed their shenanigan and asked if they would like to help me unpack. They were very eager, and both jumped at the idea of going through my stuff. Typical kid behavior. The 3 of us closed the door and started to unpack. I was emptying out a box when Sarah casually asked, "Why do you want to sleep down here alone?" Curious little girl, I thought to myself. Well, because everyone else already sleeps upstairs, and I'm not a baby like you, so I don't need to sleep near my mommy. The girls found my answer to be remarkably funny, and both laughed hysterically. "We're not babies," they both chimed. "This house is haunted, you know." I immediately paused at Laura's statement. It caught me off guard, and my mind was trying to process what I just heard. I felt a shiver and scanned the room. "Laura, why is it haunted?" I asked, afraid of the answer. "Well, there is a man that I see sometimes upstairs. Also, Sarah saw a lady with long hair in the basement once. So we don't sleep down here anymore," she replied sternly. "Yeah, Mom doesn't believe us," added Sarah. I wasn't going to lie. I was engulfed in fear. The girls went on and on about how Sarah had seen the long-haired lady in the basement once and was so scared she got sick. They told me about the old man that wanders from room to room, and even the mother and her son about how they floated through doors and disappeared as soon as they appear. Of course, they say little kids have a wild imagination, but they also say that little kids don't lie. I managed to swallow the fear and finished unpacking. My mom called us up to help with dinner. After dinner and a movie with the kids, I had forgotten about our little conversation earlier. It was late. I was tired. The kids headed off to bed, and I headed downstairs. I called up my friend and spoke to him. We ended up talking for hours, and it helped me forget about the stories. We talked and talked until my eyes grew too heavy. I slid under the covers, shut off the light, and fell asleep. I was only about 2 hours into my sleep when I felt a wind blowing on the right side of my face. Did I forget to close the window? I opened my eyes and looked up at the window. The curtains were still. No wind. The window was closed and locked. I decided I was dreaming, so I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep again. Tick. 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 I could hear my watch ticking. I squeezed my eyes harder and tried to drown out the ticking. Then I felt it again. That blowing on the side of my face. It must have been a draft, I told myself. Half asleep and eager to sleep, I just pulled the blanket up over my face and went to sleep. It wasn't long before I felt it yet again. Only this time it was accompanied by a foul smell. The smell was nauseating. It smelled like old, rotting meat. I was laying on my left side and could feel that draft on my right side. It was stronger and smelled so bad. Annoyed and curious, I turned around. As I did, I saw a dark shadow hovering above me. I screamed, and I saw it slip under the bed. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move, or I was too afraid to. It was useless screaming for help. No one would hear me. I flipped on the phone, ran to the wall, and turned on the light. I got down on my knees and looked under the bed. Nothing. At this point, I was close to hyperventilating. I crawled back in bed with the lights on, called my friend, and asked him to stay on the phone with me. I told him what I had experienced, and he suggested I was dreaming. After a few hours of reassurance and exploring every logical explanation, he had me convinced I was just dreaming. The next few nights went without incident until a Friday night. I had completed my nightly routine before bed. I brushed my teeth, wore my PJs, and jumped into bed to talk on the phone. My friend and I were talking on the phone until I heard a scratching at my door. My lamp was right next to me this time, and I had light, so I wasn't too scared of my immediate surrounding, but the scratching was coming from outside of my door. I sat in bed as quiet as I could be and had my gaze fixed on the door. Nothing. My friend had me convinced this time that it was a mouse. After all, it is an old house. I'm sure there are some crawling around. We continued with our conversation. It dragged on into the night, and as usual I fell asleep. I was awakened by a cold draft. The room was freezing. I pulled my blanket up to my chin, and as soon as I did, something pulled it back. Again, my heart was racing, and I was paralyzed with fear. I pulled my blanket up as hard as I could and held on tight. I waited for it to pull back. Nothing. Then I felt a quick pull on my feet. Someone's cold hands held onto my toes and pulled. I screamed and pulled my legs up as fast as I could. I flipped on the lights and sat on my bed with tears in my eyes. What the hell just happened? I grabbed my blanket and pillow that night and went upstairs to sleep on the couch. I spent a few nights on the couch until my grandma came over one night and was taking over the couch. I didn't want to say anything to my mom or grandma, and I certainly did not want to spook the kids, so I kept it to myself. That night I headed back downstairs. I was ready this time though. I decided to keep a nightlight plugged in. Feeling a little more safe with my new weapon, the nightlight, I fell asleep. Not long into my sleep, I felt a tickle on my face, kind of like a strand of hair tickling my face. I brushed it out of my way and continued sleeping. I felt it again. Lots of hair brushing against my face with that rotting smell present. Then I remembered. I have short hair. It can't be my hair. I opened my eyes, and there above me I finally put a face to the nightmare that had been haunting me. A rotting corpse it looked like. Her jaw was torn, and she attempted a smile that spread from ear to ear. Her long, black hair dangling in my face. No body. Just the head and torso with dangling arms. She was breathing right in my face. That rotting smell was indeed her flesh. I tried to jump out of bed, but I was stuck. I couldn't move nor scream. I could feel her ice-cold fingers holding down my arms. I was pinned to the bed and paralyzed with fear. She got closer and let out a moan. I felt a heaviness on my chest as she pressed down on me. Her tongue slipped out the side of her face where her jaw was broken. I closed my eyes, and I did the only thing I could have done. I prayed. Dear God, please help me. Please God, rid this room of the evil that dwells here. Please. It was then that I felt the pressure relieve and I was able to move. I opened my eyes, and it was gone. I looked at my arms, and there were red imprints of her hands from holding me down. I slept with a Bible next to me and said a prayer every night after that. It ceased. We moved shortly after that. I don't know who lives there now, but I pity the current tenants. That's it for today's video. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing a scary paranormal experience that happened to me when I was just 15 years old. We had just moved into a new house, and little did we know, we were not alone. Our new home was a small 3-bedroom place, and my sisters and I had to share a single room while my brother and parents had their own. Take into consideration that our house was government-owned for 3+ years. At this point in time, we were comfortable with the house, but I was still skeptical about everything. I still am after this incident. Mind that I don't want to give out my sisters' names, so I'm just going to call them White and Green. So normally, White would always sleep at the foot of the bed to charge her phone overnight, so she could talk to her boyfriend. Green and I didn't mind as that made us fit better in one bed. One night while we're all asleep, White woke up from her dreams multiple times. I am a light sleeper, so I woke up to her twitching. She kicked me and Green up and asked to switch sleeping places. Green didn't mind, and they both switched places. About an hour later, Green started to moan and whimper almost as though she was having a bad dream. White wakes her up and says, "Did you have a nightmare too?" "I assumed you did and didn't want you to have nightmares the whole night." They both asked me to turn on the lamp since I was the closest, and once they were on, White asked me, "Did you feel anything while you were sleeping?" I automatically replied with shaking my head, and she continued, "I saw a hand touch your face, but once I was fully awake, it slithered into the blanket next to you and Green. Then I had a nightmare about this ghost that looked like it had the exact same hand." Terrified, I check my bed, patting everything around me, and snuggling back into my blanket. Green's voice started to quiver and told us, "I had a nightmare too. I had a dream a ghost was chasing me. She followed me everywhere, but I was quick enough to run to the bedroom. I locked the door and sat in the corner, but I could see her bare decayed foot in the space separating the bottom of the door and the floor. She was trying to unlock it, and my only option was to jump out the window. She managed to open the door though. I turned back, and strangely she pushed me out the window. Before I could hit the floor, White, you woke me up." I laid there frightened, but as Green was telling us about her nightmare, I looked at the door. You know that feeling you get when you feel like something is watching you? I felt that right outside the bedroom door, this time only waiting for us to fall asleep. White then asked, "How did it look like?" Green responds with a whisper, scared herself, it was decaying already red and purple skin. The hair was long and covering half her face. Her fingers were oddly stretched to her knees, and her feet were bare with decaying toes. White's face turned pale automatically and said, "That's how she looked in my dream too." That following night no one fell asleep, and White decided to not sleep by the foot anymore. The next morning, we told our parents, and they said, "When we moved here, there were 2 ghosts, but your dad had a dream about the numbers and address on this house, so we thought it was okay. It's fine. It's probably just for one night." Through the day, we begged and begged for our parents to do something, so my mom burned peppers and walked around the house in it, especially our bedroom. Suddenly we heard things rattling in the basement, and that was when my dad was through. He grabbed his sword and started angrily chanting and walking around the house. He screamed at the ghost, but once he got to the basement, I think that's where my dad saw it. My dad screamed especially louder and said, "So it's you. Get out of my house, you vicious monster. How dare you do such things to this house? This is my house, and no longer yours. Get out." He chased the ghost out of the house and slammed our door shut. Till today my parents say there are no ghosts in the house, but I'm still scared. Sometimes when I stay in the basement alone until night fell, my mom tries to make up excuses for me to go up and stay up. That's it for today's video, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. And if you have any similar experiences, please share them in the comments below.
Welcome to this horror story, a tale that has been passed down for generations. In the old days, the people lived in the mountains and traveled on foot. This is the story of a family who lived far away from their village and moved to their farm to be closer to their crops. But when tragedy struck, they were faced with a terrifying reality that shook their beliefs and tested their courage. Let's begin. The farming tragedy. In the old days, some people lived on top of the mountain. They usually travel on foot. I'm not sure why, but many villagers in that period farm away from their village. This is why many families spend several nights at their country house during the week, as it is too far away to travel back and forth every day. For my family's farm, it took about half a day to get there. It is difficult to travel on foot as we have 3 small children. Therefore, we told my husband's relatives that we moved to live on our farm. At first, the family did not want us to move there and live alone. But we told them that once our children are older, we will go back to the village. After moving to live on our farm for several years, we felt comfortable and never wanted to go back to the village. We would go back occasionally and during family reunion. One day my husband was not feeling well.
I had a mild headache, watery eyes, coughing and sneezing just like the usual allergies. However, his condition worsened. He became weak and was unable to take care of himself. I have to wash him, dress him, and feed him. I want to go back to the village, but if I go, there is no one to take care of my husband. I have 2 daughters and a son, but they are still children and cannot take care of their father yet. I thought maybe my husband would eventually get better, but his condition has worsened. One night he told me if he doesn't get better, please bury him at the edge of our farm. He wants to be closer to us so he can take care of us as we live a long way from the city. I told him not to tell, and I think he will heal sooner or later. The next day, after feeding my husband in the morning, I told him that I would rush back to the village to inform his relatives. After that, I told my 3 kids to stay with their father and that I'd come back at the end of the day. That day I returned to the village to inform my husband's family and relatives of his condition. However, it was harvest season, so everyone was busy. They told me that they will come to see my husband in a few days. When I returned from the village before sunset, I saw my 3 children outside the house. They told me his father was dead. I entered the house and saw him in bed. His face was pale yellow and he wasn't breathing. No matter how hard I tried to wake him up, he didn't answer. When I touched his hands, he was already stiff. Our people believe to have a history of being resurrected as zombies after death. Knowing this fact, I tied his arms to his body and his ankles together using grass ropes. That night, I prepared a place on the floor for me and my 3 children to sleep. Our house is made of bamboo, so there are few openings and crevices in each wall. During a full moon night, it's easy to see indoors without candles or lanterns. During the first night, nothing happens. We kept my husband's body at home because we don't know what to do with it. We are just waiting for his family and relatives. I know you'd like to have a traditional funeral. That second night it was a bit dark inside. It's dark, but I see my husband in our bed. Around midnight, I woke up with heavy breathing coming from where my husband was sleeping. I thought it was just my kids, but the more I hear it, the more I think the heavy breathing is coming from where my husband is. The next day, he expected his family and relatives to come and find out what to do with his body. Before dawn that morning, I made some green beans for breakfast. My youngest son was still asleep while his 2 older sisters started the morning by helping me on the farm. After dawn, I saw my son running towards us and calling me. When he got to me, he was pale as a ghost. He told me that while he was still sleeping, he saw his father get up, jump into the kitchen, and eat some green beans off the table. I told him to stop lying, but he said he actually saw his dad get up to eat some green beans. I told her to stay there with her 2 sisters on my way home. When I walked in, my husband was still in the same place I left him. I thought maybe my son was just dreaming before. But when I approached my husband's body and started crying for him, I started touching his face and saw that some pieces of green beans were stuck between his teeth. I panic. I hope your family and relatives come that day. At sunset, there was no sign of my husband's family or his relatives. My husband's body is already starting to smell. We thought maybe just one more night and the next day his family and his relatives will show up. There was a full moon that night. I can see my husband's body best in our bed in the moonlight from outside. It was hard to sleep that night with the smells in the house. It was around midnight when I woke up with heavy breathing coming from my husband's body. I thought to myself again that maybe the heavy breathing is one of my kids. Then I heard that my husband started grinding his teeth like when he was still alive. When I looked at it, I could see a facial movement. He then turned his head to look at me and was blinking at me. Then I heard him say, "Wife, I am cold. Please give me a blanket." I got scared and covered my head with the blanket. When I peeked to look at him, He was still looking at me. That night I could not sleep. Before dawn, I saw him put his head back as it was before. My husband's body was very decomposed that day. His body starts to swell. His tongue swells out of his mouth. His skin appears to be a bluish-green color. The smells were intolerable. It's been a few days, so I thought your family and relatives would come. But by sunset there was no sign of his family and relatives. I'm afraid of what might happen that night, so I asked my 3 children to help me get their father out. We took him outside with a blanket and put him at the edge of the farm. That night I cleaned our bed. Our bed was made of bamboo, so it's easy to clean and clean. My 3 children and I slept in the bed that night. I slept next to the wall. At midnight, I woke up to a scraping noise coming from the corn part of our farm. I look out through the cracks in our bamboo wall. After a while, I saw something come out of the corn. It was a clear night sky, so I can see exactly what that thing was. He was my husband. I got really scared when I saw him crawling up to the wall where I was. Then he said, "Wife, I'm very hungry. Will you bring me something to eat?" I didn't answer. I got scared and I don't know what to say. I want you to think we're not in and I hope it goes away. But somehow it seems he knew we were inside and that I was sleeping on that side of the wall. So he said, "Wife, I'm very thirsty. Can you get me something to drink?" I didn't answer. After a while he said, "Wife, I'm cold. Will you bring me a blanket?" So I told him through the wall, "You're already dead. Please don't do this to us." After a while I heard him crawling around the house. Before dawn, it was back to the corn portion of our farm. That morning at dawn, I told my children to get ready. We are returning to the city. After everyone got ready, we locked the gate and left our farm. Halfway we met my husband's family and relatives. They were on their way to our farm. When I met them, I broke down and cried. So I told them what happened. After that, my mother-in-law and the women of the group accompanied us to the village while the men went to our farm. When the men returned to the village after dark, they said they found my husband's body on our farm. They dug a hole at the edge of our farm and buried him there. They also put stones on his grave to prevent him from crawling out. And that's the story of the family who had to face the unexpected return of their deceased loved one. This story has been passed down from generation to generation, and it remains a part of folklore today. It serves as a reminder that death is not always the end, and that the spirits of our loved ones may still linger among us. Thank you for listening, and we hope this story gave you chills. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Welcome back to our channel, where we share interesting and sometimes spooky stories. Today, we have a story about 2 friends who loved fishing in the Big 3 lakes off of Los Banos, California. But what started off as a normal fishing trip turned into a strange and ominous experience that would haunt one of the friends forever. In the 90s, my friend Bill and I loved fishing in the Big 3 lakes off of Los Banos, California. I remember we went out to the lake early one morning. It was spring season, so there was usually a lot of fog on the lake before sunrise. When we arrived, we unloaded our fishing gear and started walking along the paved path beside the lake. On the right side was a small wooded area. To the left is the lake. From where we parked to our fishing spot, it takes about 20 minutes to walk. The fish didn't bite that morning, so Bill moved lower. I can still see it from where I was. He was too cold, so I didn't want to move too much. As the sun rises, the fog begins to lift. I remember they gave me the first bite. As I'm fighting the fish at the end of the line, I look at Bill because I want him to bring me the net so I can catch the fish once I get it to shore. When I look at Bill, I see him standing on a big rock and smoking a cigarette. Her face appears to have a bluish color, and her lips appear to be large and swollen. I kept looking at it as I kept trying to get the fish to shore. No matter how much you look at it, it appears to have the face of a dead person. I thought to myself that maybe it's just the shadow of his hat that makes it look like this. At that point, my line feels slack. I no longer hear the fish pulling on the other side. So I said out loud, "Ah, shoot, the fish has escaped." He heard me, so he turned to look at me and said, "Really? Do you have a bite?" "Yeah. I was going to tell you to bring the net, but it doesn't matter." I was looking directly at his face when I said that, and it seems normal. Maybe I was just seeing things, I thought to myself. Around 10, every time I look at Bill, he looks like he has the face of a dead person, a bluish, swollen face. I take my things and go to him. When I got closer, it seemed to have a normal appearance. I didn't say anything, but said since fish don't bite, maybe we should go home, but he still wants to stay. In fact, we stayed all day. We managed to reel off some undersized fish that day. I remember it was around sunset when a big fish was pulling on one of Bill's rods and nearly dragging it into the lake. He managed to grab it and started fighting the big fish at the end of the line. From afar, we can see fishes jumping out of the water twice. When Bill brought it closer to shore, the fish weren't fighting anymore. He dragged the fish right in front of us, and what he hooked wasn't a fish. It was an empty white body bag. On the way back, we both confirmed seeing a large fish's jump out of the water twice. We tried to rationalize that maybe the big shot got away, and then the line got snagged in that white bag. After that, I remember what I saw during the morning. I told him how his face looks in the morning. Having grown up in a shamanic home, we both knew that whatever happened that day was ominous. When we got home, Bill told his parents what happened that day. His parents were so worried that they invited a shaman to do a shamanic ritual that weekend. A shaman is like a messenger between the realm of the living and the spirit realm. After the shaman finished, he said to Bill's parents, "Bill's soul loves to get lost. When your soul doesn't attach itself to your body, other spirits in the area will try to take over your body. That's why he looks like a dead man to his friend. The area where they fish is very lively." The shaman then performed a soul-calling ritual. It's a ritual to call the soul back into Bill's body. The shaman then tied a red thread to Bill's left wrist to protect him from evil spirits. Afterwards, he advised Bill to stay home for at least a month before going out fishing again. However, Bill was addicted to fishing. After about a week, one night he called me and asked if I wanted to go fishing with him early in the morning. I told him I can't go because I have to work. Then I reminded him of what the shaman said. I guess Bill's fishing addiction was taking over at the time, and he didn't want to believe what the shaman was saying. The next day, he went fishing by himself early in the morning. Around noon, 2 subjects in a boat found him floating near the shore where he usually fishes. According to the investigation, there was no foul play. His body has no bruises or wounds. Not sure if he slipped and fell in the water because that area where he and I usually fish has big rocks on the edge. It's actually quite deep as well. His death was strange. They don't know what's going on. When I visited Bill in the morgue with his family, he seemed unrecognizable to his family. But they know it was him because he has a red thread on his left wrist. To me, it looks exactly like that morning while I was fishing, but perhaps I was actually seeing something else. I do not know. The death of Bill remains a mystery to this day. Was it an accident, foul play, or something more sinister? Whatever the cause may be, the strange events that occurred that day on the lake will always be remembered by those who were there. It serves as a reminder that sometimes there are things in this world that we cannot explain or understand. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we have a spooky story that happened during the COVID lockdown in September 2020. It involves a Hmong family who had to choose an American funeral home due to the high demand of funerals in the full Hmong funeral homes. Our storyteller for today is a security guard who witnessed some unexplainable events that took place in the funeral home. Let's get into it. This was September 2020 during the whole COVID lockdown. Usually, Hmong people don't choose the American funeral home, but they have no other choice. There are too many funerals and the Hmong funeral homes are all full. There was a Lee family who decided to book this American funeral home, but with the COVID restrictions, they only allow 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. The family came in to decorate the place and hung some joss sheets. They put flowers around the coffin. The coffin is already there but emptied. They didn't bring the body, not until tomorrow, which is Saturday. After finishing the decoration, the family went home. I was security that night. I remember at 11 a.m. I heard something fall or crash in the main hall where the coffin is. I know there was no body in the coffin, yet so I went to investigate and realized that all the decoration that was hanging fell on the floor. But there was no body. I went to look inside the coffin in case there was anyone hiding there, but the coffin was empty. I get home at 7, so when the family arrived at 6, I told them what had happened and they started putting up the decorations again. I know they will carry the body in the coffin that day. That night I went back to work and patrolled the area. The main room has large windows and the doors are also glass. I saw that the coffin inside was still half open. The main room has a light on, but not all the lights are on. The place is dimly lit at night. Just at 11 a.m. I went back to the side of the building where the big windows are and saw that all the decorations that were hanging fell off again. I just came back to check since I'm from security. This is just what we do. There was no one. I looked in the coffin and it smelled funny, but there was no body inside. I left it open. I thought they hadn't put the body in the coffin yet. Or maybe they did, but they put the body back in the freezer or something. I went back out and stayed inside my car. At 6 a.m. the family came back and I opened the front entrance door for them and also told them all their decorations had fallen off. A grandmother walked up to the coffin and started crying and leaned over as if she was touching something. He started crying. I got a little closer and saw a face in the coffin. Was there really a corpse inside? What the hell? There were no funeral workers there this early. No one could have gone to the freezer, removed the body, and put it back in the coffin without my knowledge. She surprised and scared me. The family thought the corpse didn't like its decoration, so they threw it in the big trash can. I was scared, so that night I called to say I was sick, not sure who was patrolling the funeral home. That's the end of our story for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more interesting stories. Let us know in the comments if you've experienced anything spooky like this before. We'll see you in the next one, The Haunted Funeral Home.
Welcome to this spooky story about a nurse's experience working in a secured facility for elderly patients. As the majority of patients don't sleep, the facility tends to be busier at night, making it the perfect place for strange occurrences. The nurse noticed that some patients were talking to the wall or acting as though someone was in the room with them, and even mentioning the names of the ghosts or spirits they were communicating with. What happened next was truly unsettling. Let's get started. The Haunted Nursing Home. I have no prior experience when I first get out of nursing school. I'm not wanted by any employers. However, I discovered a location in the countryside. The road is a farm road. People with severe dementia or Alzheimer's disease should go here. A person with this brain condition will gradually begin to forget things. Due to the patient's constant wandering or erratic attempts to flee, this is a locked unit. Since these patients never sleep, nobody wants to work here at night. They constantly move around. Their brain never turns off. These people's bodies and brains are constantly inquisitive, despite the fact that when you go to sleep, your brain sort of shuts off. It's typically busier at night because there are fewer employees working there, and because the majority of these patients don't sleep. The majority of these elderly patients had passed away in the secured facility. Like their spirits had never left the location, it seems. When I first began working there as a nurse, a few of my patients would occasionally talk to the wall or act as though someone was in their room with them while no one was actually there. What's unsettling is that patients occasionally mention the name of the ghost or spirit they're communicating with. When Albert wouldn't let him eat his dinner, one of my patients would keep complaining to me. I played along and pretended to be in charge so that he could eat his dinner. This was something that the patient repeatedly did. I once questioned a long-time CNA there about why a few patients kept bringing up Albert. The CNA informed me that Albert used to reside there in room 2, but passed away 4 years ago. Sometimes these patients don't know what they're talking about, but other times they're quite normal and you can have a casual conversation with them. I went into a patient's room once to administer medicine. Jana is the name of this patient. The dementia this patient has is mild. The patient I was treating once looked up as I was giving her medication and said, "James, what are you doing? Stop bothering my nurse." I turned to look at the room and behind me. Nobody appeared to me. I inquired about James and his whereabouts from Jana. James enjoys touching people's hair. James enjoys touching people's hair, Jana informed me. Many years ago, he resided in this space. I got goosebumps all over my body when my patient told me this. My hair is starting to stand up. After watching the patient swallow all of the pills, I went back outside. Jana's daughter came and took her home to New Jersey a few weeks later. After that, we brought a patient by the name of Cian into that space. Cian had been working there for a while, but because of his rudeness, he didn't get along with anyone. He was moved into that room by us. Cian was slouching on a couch in the activity room when I discovered him one night at 1 a.m. He should go to his room and sleep, I told him when I woke him up. James, his roommate, is being cruel to him, he declared in a fury. Hearing this made me feel even more frightened. No one wants to work there, and especially no one wants to work at night. So it makes sense. Many CNA who work nights have grown accustomed to it. They all claim that many spirits still exist who never passed on. We hired an old CNA named Kathy a few months later. One evening, it was chilly and snowing outside. Our patient is on the verge of passing away. To help the dying patient's breath slow down, I administer some medication. Her pain is also relieved by the medication. She needs to be kept warm in bed so she can pass away quietly. But as soon as Kathy entered the room, she opened the window. There was cold. Why did she open the window? I questioned her. She promised to inform me to leave the window open when we leave the room. As soon as we were outside, Kathy informed me that after someone passes away, you must open the window to allow the soul to leave. Kathy practices and believes as a Catholic, we already have a lot of inquiring spirits inside the building, so I hope Kathy is correct. Opening the window might encourage the soul to leave rather than stay. Thank you for listening to this eerie tale. Working in a secured facility for elderly patients can be a unique and challenging experience. It's fascinating to hear stories of ghosts and spirits that seem to linger in a place long after the people who live there have passed away. Do you have any ghost stories of your own? Share them in the comments below. And remember, if you ever find yourself working in a facility like this, be prepared for the unexpected.
Welcome back to my channel. Today I have an interesting story to share with you all. Do you remember when you were a kid and your grandparents used to tell you scary stories? Well, today's story is my experience about a deserted city in Thailand and why it's not safe to sleep in abandoned cities. So, sit back and relax. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Okay, let's begin. The Haunted Village. I remember when I was still a kid, I loved hearing my grandfather's scary stories. It was the mid-1900s in the small town of Thailand. There is no TV or other form of evening entertainment. That's why when someone tells a scary story, everyone loves to get together and listen. My grandfather told stories of deserted cities. He told us children why some countries have been abandoned. He said after a long day of hunting or traveling, if you come across an old abandoned city, don't rest or sleep in that city. There is a good reason why the city was abandoned. Instead of spending the night sleeping in one of the city houses, it is safer to go to the outskirts of the city. Fine. The cemetery and spend the night there. Seriously, I thought he was joking. But the way he said it didn't sound like it was. My grandfather went on to tell us how when some people died, they rose again as zombies. Have you ever gone to a funeral and wondered why they would tie up their dead? Some of the dead would be tigers or evil spirits. The zombie or evil spirit would make the village people run away. That's why some cities are abandoned. As an adult, I love to hunt. Whenever I go hunting, I keep my grandfather's stories in mind. One day, I went hunting with my friend and his older brother. We wake up early in the morning before sunrise and start walking towards our hunting spot. From our village to our hunting place, it would take almost half a day. When we arrived, we were exhausted from our hike. After resting for a while beside a small stream, we decided to go hunting separately. We should meet at the same resting place before sunset. I managed to kill a few birds and squirrels, but didn't come across any big animals that day. Before sunset, I returned to the place where we were supposed to meet. When I arrived, my friend and his older brother had already skinned a wild boar and cut its meat into smaller pieces. They just split the meat between them and gave me nothing. Well, at least I have some birds and squirrels. On the way back, as the sun begins to set, my friend and his older brother were complaining about how heavy the meats were and that their back hurt. My friend's older brother hunted in that jungle, so I knew there was a city nearby. He said that since we probably won't be back to our village until midnight, we will go to the next village to get some rest. After walking for an hour, we saw the city. As we continue walking towards the village, we pass a small cemetery. When we arrived in the city, we quickly realized that no one lived there anymore. Houses collapsed. After searching for a while, we managed to find a house in the city center that is still standing. We knocked on the door, but no one answered. We opened the door and it was empty. The elder brother said that we will rest in that house for the night and return to our village in the morning. It was then that I told my friend and his older brother what my grandfather said about the deserted village. I suggest resting in the small cemetery for the night. They both think I'm stupid and told me to go rest in the graveyard if that's what I want. Before dark, I packed up and went to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. When I arrived, I said to an old grave, "It's been a long day and I'm tired. If you don't mind, can I rest at your place for the night?" After that, I left my things near the old grave and went to bed. It was also a cold night, but luckily, I have my blanket with me. I was so tired from walking all day. I fell asleep the moment I lay down and covered myself with my blanket. That night, I dreamed that I was having a conversation with an old man in his house. While we were talking by the fire in the middle of the room, there was a knock on the door. The old man went to open the door. There were some men outside, and one of them said, "We found some deer tracks and we just want to know if you'd like to go hunting with us." The old man said, "Oh, I'd like to go hunting, but today I have a guest. Maybe next time." After that, the men outside left and the old man closed the door. Around midnight, I woke up to strange noises in the city center. It sounded like he was screaming and screaming along with some animal noises. I covered my head with the blanket and went back to sleep. So, I keep dreaming the same dream. I dreamed that the old man and I were still talking when someone knocked on his door again. He got up to answer and a man said to him, "Here is a deer's leg. I told you to go hunting with us this morning, huh? Maybe next time." I heard the old man thank the man outside. After that, he closed the door and put the deer's leg inside and placed it by the fire. Then he asked me if I'm hungry. I said I am, but when I looked at the deer's leg, it wasn't a deer's leg. It was a bloody human leg. Then I woke up from my dream. When I opened my eyes, the sun was already overhead and it was already day. I got up and rubbed my eyes. I wonder how the two brothers were last night. I packed up and started walking towards the town where the two brothers slept last night. When I arrived at the house where the two brothers were staying, the door was wide open. I walked in, and to my horror, there was blood all over the wall of the house, and there were torn pieces of clothing in the area where the brothers slept last night. This reminded me of the strange noises I heard last night. I just got out of that house and escaped that city as fast as possible. I don't know what will happen to the brothers, and I'm not even going to wait for them. That morning, I walked back to our city alone. When I returned, I told the villagers what had happened. The next day, some men and people and I went looking for the two brothers. We returned to the old deserted village and the two brothers were nowhere to be found. Now I understand why you shouldn't rest in a deserted city. There's a reason no human wants to live there. And that's the end of today's story. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories like this one. Have you ever had a scary experience like this? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Till then, stay safe and see you in the next one.
Welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to share with you a story that happened to me when I was a rebellious 13-year-old, but I remember this story like it was yesterday. I used to be a somewhat rebellious teenager and had always been fascinated in the supernatural. In addition to doing typical rebellious teenage things like sneaking out, skipping class, I also began listening to heavy metal music and still do. The distinction at that point in my life is that I started getting deeper and deeper into Satan-worshiping music, not satanic. I was raised as a Christian and still attended church on most Sundays due to my parents forcing me to go. I by no means believed that much, which is part of the reason I assume I started going down the path I took. The more I listened to these bands and lyrics, the fascinated I became with the occult, specifically Satan worship. Being the dumb and naive kid I was, I began praying to Satan. I had no idea what I used to be doing. I would just close my eyes and pray to him. I would ask for things that had been on the more sinister side, which I won't discuss, and I would ask for him to reveal himself to me or show me a sign that he could hear me. Over the course of a few months, I actually began to feel myself change mentally. I commenced having more and more evil thoughts, and I started out fighting with my parents, who were gorgeous parents, more often. I knew I wasn't my normal self, but I additionally justified everything in my head to normalize my thoughts and actions. The more evil I felt, the more difficult and more often I prayed to Satan until one nighttime and morning changed me to this day. It was a school night, so I said my normal nighttime prayers earlier than going to bed. Sometime around 2 to 3 a.m. I awoke from a deep sleep. I wasn't having any nightmares or dreaming. I just all of a sudden woke up with a strong feeling that something or someone used to be watching me. It wasn't a good feeling in the slightest bit. Whatever it was once felt evil and malicious. I didn't feel any temperature changes and did not hear a thing. It was just a feeling. I was in bed, dealing with the wall, so my back was turned toward my bedroom door. I was scared, but I had to seem to hopefully calm myself down and realize it was all in my head. I slowly rolled over, and standing in my doorway used to be the silhouette of a man wearing a suit and a fedora-type hat, preserving a briefcase. Although I couldn't see his facial features clearly, I may want to vaguely see the outline of a neatly trimmed beard as well. Based on my doorway, I would estimate he was 5 feet 10 inches or so. He just stood there staring at me, so I rolled over and closed my eyes, scared to demise, but I still felt his presence. I wasn't dreaming, and I never went to sleep for the relaxation of the night. Hours later, I finally rolled back over, and he was long gone, but the door was still open. Since it was once a school day, I needed to take a shower, which used to be downstairs. I was still so scared about what I may see round every corner that I literally ran to the bathe and went as fast as I could. As hard as I tried, I could by no means even close my eyes, because I was afraid of seeing him once more, and I was afraid of what I might see after opening them. I ran back upstairs to my brother's room, who slept throughout the hall from me, and wouldn't leave his aspect, which was extremely unusual for me. I requested him if he heard anything that night or ever got up for any purpose, and he denied it. I could tell he wasn't lying. He began to recognize something wasn't right with me based on my actions, questions, and likely how I looked. I can't remember what I said when he requested what was wrong, but it wasn't the truth. My brother had these days got his license, and we went to the same school, so he drove me each morning. As we headed to school, about a 30-minute drive through all urban areas such as neighborhoods, strip malls, and so forth, I just looked straight ahead. Like in the house and shower, I used to be afraid to look anywhere else but what used to be right in front of me. At some point we reached a crimson light, and like in bed, I had that same feeling that I was being watched. Once again, I had to look to, with a bit of luck, give myself comfort that it was all in my head. However, boy was I wrong. It still creeps me out as I type this. However, standing there on the corner, about 15 to 20 feet from my window, was a man wearing a darkish gray suit with a fedora-type hat and carefully shaved beard, while holding a briefcase, staring right at me. I nearly had a heart attack and whipped my head around to appear straight ahead again. Seeing him literally took my breath away, like someone simply hit me in the stomach. My brother was obviously oblivious to all of this and listening to the radio loud enough that he probably never heard me gasp. As we drove off, I kept my head straight but shifted my eyes to the passenger aspect mirror, and I could still see him standing there as he slowly became his head and never took his eyes off the car until we have been out of sight. I was a mess all day. I couldn't concentrate and did not even want to go home, but when we received home later that day, I asked my dad if he ever got up that night time for any reason, specifically to check on me, and he said no. He has additionally never owned nor has he worn a fedora hat, and I always slept with my door locked. My parents had no thought I had occasionally snuck out at this point, so they had no reason to take a look at on me either. Needless to say, I immediately stopped praying to Satan and even started praying to God, although I wasn't a huge believer in either. I also stopped listening to the same music, even though ironically I still listen to some of it to this day. However, I took a long break, lol. After another month or so, I eventually began feeling normal again, and even my parents commented about how different I appeared during those months I described above. To this day, I don't understand what to think. I'm agnostic for the most part, but atheist every different day, lol. If it weren't for this story, and a few others I'll share, I would be 100% agnostic, but whatever that was once pure evil, and I don't think it's a twist of fate that I invited it into my life. Part of me wants to blow it off 30 years later and say it was all in my head, but it occurred exactly how I described it, and it wasn't a dream. Even if I rationalized that it was a dream, that doesn't give an explanation for the unlocked door or the man on the street. There's too many things that happened for me to think it wasn't real. That's it for today's story. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more story like this.
Welcome back to our channel. Today we have a fascinating story to share with you that took place in Thailand many years ago. It's a story of courage and kindness, witnessed by a young girl and her sister while foraging in the nearby forest. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into the story. It took place in Thailand where my mother was very young. She was between 6 and 8 years old and was with her older sister who was about 10 years old. They lived in a small town near some nearby forest. It was a bright afternoon that day, and they were both hungry. His parents had gone to work in the fields, so they both went to the forest to forage for food. Each carried a basket and a few long knives as they headed into the forest. They soon came across some bamboo plants. My mother, who was very hungry, wanted to find the biggest bamboo to take home. She and her sister finally found some beautiful bamboo that was next to a tall mound of dirt that was very soft, like fresh dirt. While cutting bamboo, they clearly heard the cry of a child in the forest. At first, they didn't think of anything as they thought maybe there was someone else in the forest looking for food. They continued to cut more bamboo. My mother's eyes were on a large one that was nestled in the big mound of dirt. Just as she started cutting into it, she and her sister heard the baby cry again, but louder this time. As they looked around, they realized that crying was sounding very close. But they saw no one. They paused in what they were doing and listened more carefully to see where the crying was coming from. As they listened, they heard a woman's voice trying to soothe her baby. She said, "Don't cry, my son. Don't cry." Very frightened, they noticed that the woman and her crying child appeared to be behind the mound. They quickly grabbed their things and walked past the mound to see if anyone was there. Turning around, they saw no one, but they continued to hear the cry of the child and the woman saying, "Don't cry, my son. Don't cry." Suddenly, the woman's reassuring voice turned into a giggle, and the baby's crying got worse. My mom's sister started running, and my mom was crying after her as she tried to keep up with her. As they ran, they heard the woman's laughter grow louder and louder. Trying their best to find their way out of the forest, the woman's voice began following them. In their ears, they kept hearing a whispering, as if the ghost wants to eat them. When they found the exit from the forest, the voice stopped and they both ran as fast as they could towards the house. When they told their parents what had happened, their mom and dad scolded them for going into the woods and disturbing a grave. It turned out that the mound was actually a grave where a pregnant woman had been buried. My mother and her sister couldn't eat the bamboo they brought because they thought it would be a bad omen, so their father had to throw it away and bless their house in case the ghost followed them. And that's the end of our story. We hope you enjoyed this heartwarming tale of compassion and bravery. If you have any similar stories that you'd like to share, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Welcome to our channel, where we share stories and experiences that are both informative and thought-provoking. In today's video, we'll be sharing a nurse's encounter with a 68-year-old man and the strange and unsettling experience she had during her visits to his home. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button, now! Okay, let's begin. Something. Smell. There was a 68-year-old man with an infected foot ulcer. I would go and clean his wound, bandage it, and then give him an antibiotic. I saw him 3 times a week. I know his foot will probably be amputated because it's not healing. The doctor has already told him that his foot has to go or the infection will get worse, but he didn't give the doctor permission to have his foot amputated. He said he would rather die than have his foot cut off. We can't do anything, so we can only clean his foot and give him an antibiotic. During the day, his son and grandchildren are at work or school, so only he is at home. I usually went to see him at 10 in the morning. I remember the first time I will see him. The son told me that the door of him is those locks that could be opened by hitting 4 numbers. He told me the code so that I can open the door myself instead of his father coming to open it because of his father's foot. I got there and rang the bell to let the grandfather know I'm there so I won't scare him. After that, I enter in the code and open the door. When I first walked in, the whole house had a rotten smell. I know this smell comes from the grandfather's foot ulcer. It smells like rotten meat. I saw a grandmother sitting on the couch in the living room, but the television wasn't on. A greeting to the grandmother. I know the grandfather is in his room because his foot hurts and he can't walk. I went to his room and he was in bed listening to radio. When he saw me, he waved and got up to sit on the side of the bed. I gave him some painkillers, and after that I started cleaning his wound and then bandaged it up. I give him some antibiotics before I go. 2 days later, I went to his house again. When I walked in, I saw that the grandfather was in his wheelchair and was out sunbathing in the garden. I see it through the sliding glass door. His house still smells like rotten meat. I went down the hall and saw the grandmother sitting on the bed in the bedroom. I said, "Hi, how are you?" She didn't return the greeting, but that's okay. I'm just there to see the grandfather. I went out to see the grandfather. When I arrived, I said hello and that I'm there to clean the wound and give him some medicine. When we were outside, there was no smell of rotting meat. I've unwrapped his wound, and it doesn't smell like rotten flesh. As nurses, we have to smell the wound. So I tried to smell it, and there is no smell. The wound doesn't actually look that bad. I thought to myself that maybe we are outside, and that's why I can't smell it. As I bandaged the grandfather's wound, I asked if his wife was okay. The grandfather said, "Who? Are you talking about my wife? Oh, she died about a month ago?" When I heard that, I was double thinking if that was her earlier. But I need to clarify, so I asked him who else is staying at home with him. It was then that the grandfather said that he was the only one at home. Now I felt goosebumps all over my body. Later, when I had a chance to talk to the grandfather's son on the phone, he confirmed that the grandmother had died about a month ago after suffering an acute stroke. 3 weeks later, the grandfather's foot became infected in his bones. He still refuses to let the doctor cut off his foot to save his life. The bacteria got into his bloodstream and his kidneys shut down. They took him to the hospital, and after 4 days he died. Some people believe that when you die and start to rot, if people view your spirit in awe, your spirit will smell like your decaying body. That's how some people believe things. In my case of treating the grandfather, I know the rotten smell didn't come from his wound. It was from the grandmother of the house. She had just died a month ago. Perhaps her spirit still smells like her decomposing body in the underground coffin. Thank you for watching today's video. If you found it interesting, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had a similar experience or if you believe in the idea of spirits carrying the scent of their decomposed body after death. Until next time, take care.
Welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to share with you a story about the apartment complex that I grew up in. This place was filled with strange rumors and occurrences, and to this day, I'm not sure what to believe. But I wanted to share my experience with you all and let you decide for yourselves. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Okay, let's begin. The haunted apartment. I grew up in Los Angeles all my life. My family lived in an old apartment complex. I'm sorry I can't tell where the apartment is, as there are still people living there. I don't want to scare them. When my family came to the US in 1987, we lived in these old apartments. There are so many rumors about these apartments. I don't know if the rumors were true. It was said that long ago, before these apartments were built, the whole area was a cemetery. I remembered when we first got there, there was a community pool, but for some strange reason, the children kept drowning in that pool. The strange thing is that there would be a lot of people in the pool. Then when everyone came out, someone was at the bottom of the pool, dead. Nobody knows what happened. I know a boy who drowned there. There were so many people living there. I don't want to mention his real name, so let's call him Jeremy. I remember while I was swimming, he kept going under the water and pulling on my leg. He was 2 years older than me, so he kept harassing me in the pool. I was swimming underwater, and when I opened my eyes, he was underwater, and he was smiling terrifyingly at me. After he pulled my legs 4 times, I told my little brother we had to go home. The sun is setting, and it's a bit chilly anyway. After the sun went down, people got out of the pool, and that's when they noticed a body at the bottom of the pool. It was Jeremy. According to paramedics, he'd been dead for at least 3 hours. But I just got out of the pool an hour ago, and he was still alive during that time. Thinking about it now sends shivers down my spine. After many drownings in that pool, they finally filled it with dirt and planted grass over it. Growing up and living in those apartments, I often heard the laughter of children, especially at night. The strangest thing is that you can see small children near the trash cans late at night around 2 a.m. These are children of about 4 or 5 years old. My father noticed this and never let us take out the trash at night. I guess you saw those kids when you woke up at 5 a.m. to go to work. There was a rumor that there was an orphanage in that area. The large grassy field was a cemetery for those orphan children. Even if it's just a rumor. Growing up there, I dated a girl who lives in the back. Her name is Jenny. Her apartment is at the back, facing a large grassy field. During that time, when I went to visit my girlfriend, if the parents are not at home, I usually let her stay outside with me. I only come in when his parents are home. Some young people are more traditional and respectful. Then one night her parents were at a funeral and they weren't home. It was just her, so she wanted me to go out with her. Luckily, my girlfriend's apartment is on the first floor, so we sat on 2 chairs outside and talked well into the night. I think it was around 12 a.m., and Jenny's parents weren't home yet. She didn't want to go into the apartment. We were talking, and it was a full moon. We kept hearing noise. It's as if someone is knocking on the window on the side of the apartment that overlooks the empty field. After hearing these knocks for about 10 minutes, I told Jenny that I was going to go see who or what was knocking on the window. I was a little scared, so I hardened my heart because my girlfriend was there. I went to the back of her apartment and saw nothing. Her window wasn't broken. I came back and was about to go around the corner to go back to my girlfriend, and then I heard banging again. I realized that the knocking were above me, so I looked up and saw a hanged man from the second-story window. At first I saw the 2 legs kicking and thought it was a bird, but I stepped back and in the moonlight I see it was a man who hanged himself and was kicking the wall. I ran back to tell Jenny. We both went to see. However, when we got there, the knocking stopped. We didn't see anyone hanging on the second floor. We both got scared, so we went back to Jenny's apartment. It was late, so she stayed inside and I stay outside, but we left the door open to talk. Then his parents and siblings come back. When his father saw us, he turned on the high beam and quickly parked the car. They got out of the car and got mad at us for disrespecting them. That night I have to take Jenny home with me. Living there was so strange. As I got older, I noticed something very strange. Maybe the people who live there don't know or don't pay attention. But I have noticed that those apartments that have the number 6 or 9 always seem to bring bad luck. As if they keep hearing or seeing ghosts in their apartment, or something bad happens to them and their family. This event happened in 1992, I believe. I remember it was a year away from my daughter's birth, so I think it was 1992. There's this apartment that has a number 6 on the door. I can't say exactly what number, but I remember it was a number 6 and another number. We lived near that apartment, and one day, a woman hanged herself in the bathroom. The family was trying to open the door, but because she hanged herself and her body was blocking the door, they had a hard time opening the door. When they opened the door and lowered her, she was already dead. Her children crying and calling her was the saddest thing I have ever witnessed. Her family and relatives said that she had just walked past them and she told them to eat more. But the truth is, she's already hanged herself in the bathroom, and when she came to tell them to eat may have been her spirit. We don't know what happened or why she hanged herself. Bad things always happen in those apartments. Sometimes the son quarreled with the father or the father kicked him out. Fire trucks are always there because someone's apartment is always on fire. When my daughter was 4 and my wife Jenny was pregnant again. During this time, I already had a job, so we moved out of my parents' house and went to live in an apartment which has a number 9. There were rumors that a family used to live in that apartment. That family has a daughter. But she died because she plugged a broken metal fly swatter into an electrical socket and was electrocuted. The 4th night after we moved, my wife and daughter were already in bed, but I didn't know they were already in bed. I got out of the shower at 11 p.m. The lights in the apartment were already off. I got out of the shower, and before I turned off the light and went to the bedroom, I heard scratching in the living room. I left the bathroom light on and went into the living room. I saw a girl who I thought was my daughter sitting in the corner next to the sofa. She was scratching or touching the socket. I said, Honey, let's go to bed before Dad turns out the light. She turned her head without her body to look at me. Her face was all black and dry and cracked. I jumped up in fright and yelled at her. I was scared, but I have to scream to stay strong. I grab a plastic chair and run to the wall to turn on the light, but when I turn around, she's gone. My wife came out asking me, why am I yelling? I asked if we have chili. I went to the refrigerator and got our bag of chili. That night I burned pepper all night and did not sleep. After 2 weeks we moved back in with my parents. Today we no longer live there. Even though the place was ugly and haunted, I have many good memories there. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my story. It's weird to look back on those memories and wonder what was really going on. If you have any stories of your own, feel free to share them in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.
Welcome to my channel. In 1992, a family living in the small rural town of Planada, California. They experienced a series of strange events that shook them to their core. From moans in the night to a shadowy figure outside their window, their house seemed to be haunted by an unseen presence. But things took a turn for the worse when their beloved grandmother passed away, and the family was left grappling with the aftermath of her death. This is their story. Let's begin. The Shadow in the Night. In 1992, my family lived in a small rural town called Planada. We only have a few chickens, but our yard is big. We grow sugarcane, corn, squash, and vegetables. At that time, my grandparents still live with us. One day, some of our relatives came to ask my grandfather to do a ritual for them, so my grandparents left the city that night. That night, around 11 p.m., my brother and I were in bed and couldn't sleep. My brother was only 9 at the time, and we shared the same room. Our room was next to the courtyard, so we have light in the courtyard. At first, I heard my grandmother moaning in pain from her room. I've heard it twice. I knew my grandparents weren't home that night, so I didn't go to check. About 5 minutes later, I see a shadow standing outside our window. Though my window curtain is dark in color, I can see the outline of a shadow with messy hair. This time, the moans came from the window. I was only 11 at the time, so I cover my head with the blanket. At 4 in the morning, my parents came and woke up my brother and me. We were told that Grandma is in the hospital and they have to go out of town to see her. We both got up to go close the door when my parents left. After my parents left, we turned off all the lights and went back to our room to sleep. My brother and I were sleeping when I heard it again. Moans coming from the window. I looked and there is the shadow again. The shadow kept making a sound. I was no longer sleeping. Around 6 in the morning, when there is some light outside, the shadow was gone. Later that day, my parents called us and said they weren't coming home that evening. They told us not to cook anything, and if we were hungry, we only ate cereal or ramen noodles. I told my mom we were scared, and my mom told me, "It's our house, so don't be scared." That night, I could not fall asleep again. Around midnight, my brother got up without saying a word to me. He left our room and left the door open, and it looked like he went to the bathroom in the hallway. I waited, and it was almost an hour, and he hasn't come back to bed, so I got up to go check. When I looked into the dark corridor, I saw that the bathroom light was still on, even though the door was closed. I went to the bathroom and started knocking and asking if he was okay. Just when he heard my voice, he opened the door and walked out, grabbing my shirt, dragging me into our room and closing the door. We turned on the light, and his face was all white. He told me he went to pee and left the bathroom door open. While he was urinating, he saw his grandmother in her clothes walking past the door, so he just closed the door and hoped that she would not come to see him. We left the light on and didn't sleep that night. I didn't want to scare because he's younger than me. The next day when our parents are at home, there were many phone calls from our relatives. I hear my mother talking to a relative on the phone. My mother said that our relatives took my grandparents to their house that day. At night, our relative arranged a place in the living room for my grandmother and grandfather to sleep. That night, around 1 a.m., my grandfather woke up to my grandmother kicking and stomping in her sleep, so my grandfather said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" My grandfather got up to turn on the light and saw my grandmother frothing at her mouth, so they called 911. Grandma was taken to the hospital and died at 5 a.m. That morning, When my parent came home, my brother and I told her what happened at home while they were away. My mother looked at us with tears of fear and said, "Oh, is it true?" She really looked scared. We did the funeral without any problems. Even after performing the soul release ritual, my grandfather said that one night my grandmother still comes to sleep next to him as usual. She come and lay down next to my grandfather, and he can feel the bed getting heavier. Grandma and Grandpa are close and really love each other. They are always together, so we thought maybe he misses her a lot and he sees things. A year after my grandmother's death, at midnight, I was in bed but could not sleep. I kept hearing banging on the wall like someone kicked the wall. This went on for 5 minutes. Then I heard my mom and dad open the door and saw the light come on in the hallway. Then my dad opened the door and told me to call 911 because something was happening to my grandfather. My dad doesn't speak English, so I went to get the phone in the dining room to dial 911. The guy on the phone asked what was up, so I went to my grandfather's room and he was foaming at the mouth and kicking the wall. His eyes were white and he didn't move his arm but just kicked the wall a couple of times like he was choking. It's like he's sitting up or having a seizure. I was on the phone with the 911 guy until the ambulance arrived. My grandfather was taken to hospital and then at 5 a.m. he passed away. Around the same time, my grandmother also died. Nothing strange has happened in our house since my grandfather's death. I guess Grandma and Grandpa love each other so much that Grandma came back to take Grandpa with her. The family's experience with the supernatural left them with many unanswered questions, but one thing was certain: the love and bond between family members could not be broken, even by death itself. Their story serves as a reminder that life is fleeting and that we should cherish our loved ones while we still have them. And who knows? Perhaps there is more to this world than what we can see with our own eyes. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.
Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you a personal story about how a person had a health challenge that he had faced since he was a child by using medical procedure and being a spiritual family for a way to live. Before we start, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button now. And let's begin. The story of me. My name is Jordan Sarah. I was born Johnson, but later chose my mother's surname. I grew up without a father. My mother left my father when I was little. I later changed my last name to Sarah instead of Johnson because my mother is also a father figure to me. Even though my mother remarried and my current father is a good man, I still refuse to change my last name. My current stepfather is a Burman. I love my little brother Jimmy. When I was 4, he always came to sleep with me in my room. Sometimes in the middle of the night, someone would open my door and I see a little boy come in, and it was Jimmy. He always told me there's a guy in a blue shirt who always takes off his blanket. I used to joke with him that it was me who took the blanket off him, but he never believed me. Now that Jimmy is older, he doesn't come to my room anymore. I miss it though. Even though Jimmy and I share a different father, we share the same mother. He will always be my little blood brother. Enough with my brother, Jimmy. This story is about me. Maybe one day Jimmy will tell someone my story. By the time that time comes, I may be long gone. I will no longer be in this world. I don't want to tell you my story from when I was little. That would be boring. Where should I start? Oh yes, I know. I remember it was my 3rd night in the hospital. After the doctor checked me out, he told my mom to take me to the hospital. The doctor said the whites of my eyes look a little yellowish. It was then that my mother noticed it too. Yellowing of the whites of the eye is a concern with liver disease. My mom took me to the hospital, and after doing a blood test and chest scan, my mom was told I had liver disease. Doctors suspected that I may have already had liver disease for many years. I went to sleep. That night I woke up at 1 a.m. to see my mom next to my bed holding my hand. It looks like she just finished crying. She said she will tell me something. She said when I was 2, she went into the pharmacy program and she was going to leave me with my father. My dad is a gangster, so he always hangs out with his friends. My mother said that every time he came home at 8 p.m., I was already asleep and my father had already gone out with his friends. Several months later, my mom found out my dad was using meds to make me sleepy so he could hang out with his friends. My mother told me that those drugs my father gave me to make me sleepy cause liver damage if taken in every day. She thinks my liver disease was caused by those meds from when I was a kid. She said when I was young it was stupid to be with my father, who was a gangster. I forgave my mother and told her that if she hadn't chosen my father, I would never have been born. After being in the hospital for 3 days, the doctor released me home. He prescribed me some medicines that will help me with my liver disease, but those meds make me poop 4 to 6 times a day. However, life was normal after that. I was fine even though I have liver disease. When I was 19, my liver got a lot worse. I got really sick, and I keep bleeding. The doctor told us that I will die in a year if I don't have a liver transplant. I keep getting blood transfusions to help me stay alive. We work with the hospital, and they put me on a waiting list for a liver transplant. I was told that usually if I have liver disease from alcohol use, I will never get a liver transplant. But since I'm not an alcoholic, I'm qualified to be on the waiting list for a liver transplant. We asked them how long the patient has to wait for a liver transplant. They said it's usually 30 days to 5 years. When they said that, I saw my mother's tears rolling down her cheeks. I will die if I have to wait more than a year. One day, everyone is at work and at school. I was home alone and start pooping blood again. It felt like a week. I decided to lie down, but first I went to my brother Jimmy's room to find his Game Boy. I went into his room and grabbed his Game Boy off the nightstand. When I turned around, I felt dizzy and fell. I don't know how long I've been down, but when I woke up, I felt that someone was making fun of me. I opened my eyes a little to look, and it was a strange guy in a blue shirt tugging at my leg. I passed out again. Later, I woke up at 2 p.m. My family should be home in about 2 hours. I got up to lay down on the sofa. Later, I told my mother what happened that day. My mom said she knows someone who can help look at the spiritual side and see what's going on. I asked her why she believes in such things when she's a pharmacist. You said there are things we don't know. Not everything has to be scientific. That Saturday, my mother and I went to see an old lady. My mother said she has already paid her to investigate my fate. I told my mom she's just wasting her money. If you can see the past and the future, then why gamble and lose money? My mom just told me we have to try. I asked my mom how much she paid that woman, and my mom said $800. When we got home, I asked my mom what Grandma said. My mom told me, she said you will be cured of your liver disease. She said you made a blood pledge with your wife in your past life. But since you two are separated by the ocean, you couldn't find your wife, so you decided to reincarnate. But you're only going to live this life as long as your wife does. I can't believe my mother believes such a thing. It's stupid and old Granny is just robbing my mother. I told my mom I can't believe she believes such a thing. My mother told me that she didn't believe it at first either. Then my mom said, Grandma knew about your birthmark on the left side of your back too. She said you died of a gunshot wound in your previous life. You died on the bank of a river. Did I die on the banks of a river? I really don't want to believe such a thing, but I guess my mom was happy that I was cured of my liver disease. This makes her happy. This is good for her mind, and I should be happy with her too. She is my everything, and if that makes her happy, then so am I. After 4 months, I got a call that they had found me a liver. My family was very happy. I guess it came true that I will be cured of my liver disease. I went to the hospital. I was in the hospital for 6 days after my liver transplant. They want to make sure everything is fine before they release me. While I was in the hospital, my girlfriend didn't come to see me. She kept saying she was busy. If someone really loves you, you won't have to ask them to come see you when you're in the hospital. I knew something was wrong. I wanted to go home, but the doctor wanted to keep me a few more days. They just want to make sure everything is okay, and they want to have more blood tests done every morning. I refused to stay, so I signed a paper to leave the hospital. When I got out, I found that my girlfriend had already seen someone else. She refused to give me another chance. Even if I understand, I would also be tired if I was with someone who was always sick. I told her I have a liver transplant, and she should be better from now on. But she was already too involved with her new boyfriend. I tell her I'm waiting for her. After 3 months of waiting, I was desperate. I can't wait any longer. She didn't call me, and even when I called, she didn't answer. We had been dating for 4 years. We were high school sweethearts. Letting go is hard. Desperate, I decided to go to a fortune teller. I know fortune teller are scammers, but I was desperate. I want to know if my girlfriend will ever come back. My fortune teller name is Mary. When I went into her office, it was kind of creepy. It has voodoo dolls and candles everywhere. She is old and blind. It was just her and her granddaughter. I have to pay $150 in advance. She asked me what I want to know. I told her that I love my girlfriend very much and am still waiting for her. I want to know if she will come back to me. Mary put cards on the table and told me to pick one. I chose one and gave it back to Mary. She didn't even look at it. She just held it in her hand. Then she told me that my girlfriend won't come back. She said my girlfriend is getting married sometime next year to her new boyfriend. But then she told me that there is good news. However, in order for her to tell me the good news, I have to pay $20 to reveal another card. I was already a little angry when she told me my girlfriend was getting married. She annoyed me even more when she told me I had to pay another $20 to reveal the good news. Mary told me that she sees that I'm angry, but that I can leave if I don't want to know the good news. I feel this blind woman can see my mind. But hey, it's only $20. I paid her $20 to choose another card. I gave it to her and she held it in her hand and said I would soon meet my soulmate. I have a soulmate. I asked her, how do I know someone is my soulmate and what she looked like? Mary said that to reveal such a big detail, I will have to pay $30 to choose another card. At this point, I'm thinking what a big scam I've gotten myself into. At that point, Mary said that I'm having negative thoughts and that she is not scamming me. She said she's only telling me what she knew. If I paid her $30, I would spend a total of $200 on this scam. But I was desperate for something to make me feel better about my love life. I paid her $30 to choose another card. I gave it to Mary and she held it in her hand. She told me that sometime I will meet my soulmate next year. My soulmate has a small scar on her face. Then Mary said that there's another very important detail that I should know, but I have to pay her another $30 to choose another card. I told her it's fine and I thank her. I left her office because I don't want her to screw me anymore. I don't want to know this very important detail she was talking about. After that very important detail, there will probably be another very important detail that I will also have to pay for. It's ridiculous. At least I'm only spending $200. Last time, my mom spent $800 on that other fortune teller. The following year, I turned 21. One day we went snowboarding with my stepfather and his relatives. I always loved the snow. I love snowboarding and haven't done it for 3 years due to my liver disease. If I fall, I can easily bruise or bleed heavily. But with my new liver, I'm glad I can get back to snowboarding. That day, one of the girls in the group was snowboarding and fell near a pine tree. She was bleeding from the right side of her face near her eye. I told her my mom has an emergency kit. I went to our car and pulled it out. I started to treat it. I rinsed her small wound, applied ointment, and covered it with a Band-Aid. I told her that I can ask my mother about scar prevention ointment, since my mother is a pharmacist. I asked for her phone number so I can call her when I get the ointment. She gave me her number. It was then that I remember what Mary told me. Mary said that I will meet my soulmate this year, and she will have a scar on her face. I cannot believe. It was worth the $200. This girl's name is Samantha, and she is beautiful. Since that day, we've talked a lot on the phone about her. After 2 months, Samantha agreed to be my girlfriend. The ointment I gave him helps prevent scarring on her face. It's just a small white line on the face, and with makeup, you can't even see it. She is beautiful whether she has a scar or not. After 4 months of dating, Samantha invited me to her grandmother's funeral one day. She told me her grandmother died of brain cancer. I went to the funeral the first day. When it came time to visit her grandmother in the coffin, I went there with Samantha. Samantha's grandfather was next to the coffin and cried a lot. I looked at Samantha's grandmother in the coffin. Her grandmother has a scar on the right side of her forehead. When we sat down again, I joked with Samantha and told her what Mary had told me about my soulmate having a scar on her face. She jokes and says that my soulmate is really her grandmother, then her and I laughed. Then I told Samantha that she is my soulmate because she has a scar, but she covered it with makeup. 2 months later, I woke up one day with a very sore right leg. I start touching my right leg and feel a lump inside my right thigh. I ignored it for a few days and then it got worse. I told my mother. She took me for a scan. The doctor was concerned and suspected that I had cancer all over my body. They said it's all over my lymphatic system. They did more tests. A few days later, a doctor told me that he suspected the tumors originated in my new liver. When my mother heard this news, she wanted to contact the hospital that gave me my new liver. She wanted to know if they gave me liver cancer on purpose. I told her not to. I told her it was me who refused to stay in the hospital after my liver transplant. I left early. Maybe if I stayed longer, maybe they might find out that the liver they gave me was not good liver. The more we talked to the doctor, the more desperate the situation became. They said they can't cure cancer by removing it because it's all over the body. They can only slow it down with chemotherapy. They also told me they also found 2 small nodules in my brain. I guess death is inevitable. I told my mother that I refused to have chemotherapy. Those cancer drugs are very hard on the body and would make my hair fall out. Whatever time I have left, I will take it because the cancer meds will make me miserable until the day I die. My mother cried. I told her I don't want a traditional burial. I want to be an organ donor and save other people's lives. But my mother told me that I have cancer, and they will never allow me to donate my organs to others. I told my mother that if so, When I die, please donate my body to science so they can study more about cancer. Maybe one day they will find a cure for cancer. I was very ill and stayed at home. Samantha comes to see me every day. A nurse also comes to see me every other day. The nurse warned me that the cancer in my brain can cause hallucinations and even seizures. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I start to smell sweet. Then suddenly my body started shaking uncontrollably. Then I saw a girl my age coming dressed all in white, and she hugged me tightly and stopped shaking. She would stay by my side until I fell asleep. I don't even know who that girl is. I've read about seizures and they said some people will hallucinate before it happens. All I know is that, for me, I would smell something sweet or sugary before I start having a seizure. One day I was sleeping in my room. I felt some hair being pulled out. I opened my eyes and it was my mother. She said she's sorry she woke me up. I asked him why she pulled my hair out and put it in a Ziploc bag. One day, Samantha came and held my hand. I was curious about Samantha's grandmother, so I asked her why her grandmother has a scar on her forehead. She told me that when her grandmother and her grandfather were still young in Thailand, she had a fight and her grandfather hit her grandmother in the heat with a chair. I asked her how her grandfather was after her grandmother died. She told me she's better. Then Samantha told me that his grandfather at the time was not his real grandfather. I asked him where is his real grandfather. Samantha said that during the time the people were crossing the Mekong River, the other grandparent were with other people. They reached the Mekong River and made rafts, but waited until dawn to cross the river because crossing it at night is too dangerous. At dawn, her grandparents and other people crossed the Mekong in their raft. Some remained hidden near the river. Once they got to the Thai side, the sun was just rising. Her grandfather and other men returned to collect the rest of the other people. They returned to the low side and more people boarded the raft. As they were about to return to the Thai side, the communist soldiers saw them and started shooting them from behind. Samantha said his real grandfather died on the low side of the Mekong River. I was curious, so I asked Samantha to bring me a photo of her grandmother when she was young. She said she remembers her parents having a family photo album. The next day she came with his parents' photo album. She showed me a photo of her grandmother when she was still in Thailand. She was younger then. She looks like the woman who used to come and hug me when I was having a fit. I remember waking up one day to see the girl in a white dress and the boy in a blue shirt standing by my bed. The boy said he doesn't know where to go and wants to come with me and the girl in white. I know I'm dying. I'm only 22, but I'm richer than most people in this world. My girlfriend Samantha is always by my side. She never left me until my last breath. Thank you for listening. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, you have the strength within you to overcome it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I was alone that day. My mother would always be by my side and not come home to sleep. But she was late on my third night in the hospital. All I remember is that when I turned 14, my eyes started getting blurry and I needed glasses. My mother is a pharmacist, and whenever something goes wrong, she always takes me to the doctor. I remember that he took me to the ophthalmologist to get me some glasses. I just shook my head. I can't believe my mother believes that when she's a pharmacist. When we arrived, I was sitting on the couch while my mom and older grandmother were doing their voodoo thing. They have a bucket in front of them and they crack open a raw egg and pour the contents of the egg into the bucket. I don't know what they were talking about as they didn't speak English. She said she wants to take some of my DNA from the root of my hair. One day, if the scientists can clone humans, she will want to clone me again. As she said it, her tears streamed down her cheeks. I smiled. My mother is my everything. I asked her if she wanted even more. I would pull a few more hairs, but she said she had enough. One day, Samantha came and held my hand. I was curious about Samantha's grandmother, so I asked her why her grandmother has a scar on her forehead. She told me that when her grandmother and her grandfather were still young in Thailand, she had a fight and her grandfather hit her grandmother in the heat with a chair. I asked her how her grandfather was after her grandmother died. She told me she's better. Then Samantha told me that his grandfather at the time was not his real grandfather. I asked him where is his real grandfather. Samantha said that during the time the people were crossing the Mekong River, the other grandparent were with other people. They reached the Mekong River and made rafts, but waited until dawn to cross the river because crossing it at night is too dangerous. At dawn, her grandparents and other people crossed the Mekong in their raft. Some remained hidden near the river. Once they got to the Thai side, the sun was just rising. Her grandfather and other men returned to collect the rest of the other people. They returned to the low side and more people boarded the raft. As they were about to return to the Thai side, the communist soldiers saw them and started shooting them from behind. Samantha said his real grandfather died on the low side of the Mekong River. I was curious, so I asked Samantha to bring me a photo of her grandmother when she was young. She said she remembers her parents having a family photo album. The The next day she came with his parents' photo album. She showed me a photo of her grandmother when she was still in Thailand. She was younger then. She looks like the woman who used to come and hug me when I was having a fit. I remember waking up one day to see the girl in a white dress and the boy in a blue shirt standing by my bed. The boy said he doesn't know where to go and wants to come with me and the girl in white. I know I'm dying. I'm only 22, but I'm richer than most people in this world. My girlfriend Samantha is always by my side. She never left me until my last breath. Thank you for listening. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, you have the strength within you to overcome it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to my channel, where we bring you stories of the unknown and the unexplained. In today's video, we bring you a chilling tale about a deserted village that was plagued by evil spirits. It's a story that will make you question the existence of the supernatural. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button now. Okay, let's begin. The curse of the village. I remember when I was a kid, I often heard stories about a deserted village. I remember there was a story about a young woman who died while she was waiting for her boyfriend to return from the war. The spirit of the young woman possessed the dead and rotten body. She refused to be buried by the villagers because she was still waiting for her boyfriend to return. The villagers got scared and everyone left the village. Growing up, I like hearing that story. I thought it was just a story the elders made up to scare us kids so we wouldn't stay up so late at night. I didn't think I could actually experience the horror that drives people to leave their village. In the 1950s, my wife and I got married and went to live in a new small village in the mountains of Laos. During that time, there weren't many people in the village. The village was quiet and peaceful. I remember one morning, the village chief called everyone to gather in front of his house. During our small morning meeting, the village chief told us that he had a dream the night before. In her dream, the guardian spirit of the land warned her to keep the noise down after dark. The guardian spirit said that there are evil spirits that arise during the night. We need to keep the noise down after dark to avoid attracting evil spirits to our village. All the villagers have agreed with the chief that we will do everything before sunset to avoid making too much noise at night. That became the rule of our town. It's always nice to be one of the first families to build a village. You can choose a good place to build your house. You have the option to choose a good land near the country to farm. After 4 years, more and more people start moving to our village. As our village grew and expanded, we forgot what the village chief said. As more and more people moved to our village, we were no longer afraid of the dark. Each of us broke the village rule. Children love to play and run around after dark when it's cooler outside. The elders love to play their bamboo pipe instruments and gather to tell stories at sunset. One morning, the village chief called everyone to his house for a meeting. He reminded everyone of the village rule. He said, "We've been in this village for almost 5 years. This village has a guardian spirit. The guardian spirit said we shouldn't make so much noise after dark. All of you can do whatever you want. But as the head of your village, I ask you to turn down the noise after dark to avoid attracting evil spirits to our village." Most of the villagers didn't listen and left the meeting. On that day, the villagers keep their children playing at sunset until it gets dark. The elders would gather outside to tell stories and play their musical instruments as usual. The next day, the village chief failed to wake up his youngest daughter. She seemed to have died peacefully in her sleep. His daughter was the first victim in our village. Some village elders blamed the village head and told him that his daughter died due to his big mouth. The village chief and his family held a 3-day funeral for his young daughter and buried her on the outskirts of the village. The villagers decided to mark that place as our village cemetery. After the funeral, the chief announced that he and his family were leaving the village. He told the villagers to choose someone to replace him as the village head. Subsequently, he and his family left the village. After the chief and his family left, a village elder became very ill. At night, he starts moaning as if he is in a lot of pain. A few days later, he died and was buried in the cemetery next to the chief's daughter's grave. The day after his burial, a boy from our village suddenly fell ill and died as well. As more and more villagers got sick and died, we started to notice that there are some strange cats hanging around the graveyard just outside our village. Every day before sunset, we would hear cats crying and meowing from where the cemetery is. Eventually, cats start coming to our town. These cats are very strange. They look like regular cats, but instead of having horizontal eyes, their eyes are vertical. When you look directly at these cats, they usually walk and run on all fours like normal cats. But when you see them out of the corner of your eye, they appear to walk on two legs. At night, if you go outside, these cats look like babies with long, messy hair. As more and more villagers got sick and died, everyone started to move. At first, the villagers didn't want to move and leave everything they built behind. But after everyone loses a loved one, the villagers start moving one family at a time. Eventually, our village grew cold and empty. My wife and I were also planning to move, but my wife had just given birth to our son. My wife was still too weak to travel on foot. That was the only reason we didn't leave. During that time, only my little family and one other family remained in the village. One day, I went to that family's house because I wanted to know if they were leaving town soon. That family told me that they plan to leave, but the grandfather is very ill. They're just waiting for Grandpa to pass before they leave town. I said to Jovan, "Hey, I'll get back to my place before the sun is completely down. Come tell my family when you're leaving. We also want to go with your family." Jovan told me he will let me know. On the way back, there were cats following me. Every time I turned to look at them, they would scatter and flee, only to appear around the corner from every empty house along the way. When I got home, I told my wife about the situation with the other family. I also told her what happened on my way home. That night, my wife and I decided not to light fires or light candles inside our house. We don't want the cat or evil spirits to think we are home. Above all, we don't want our newborn to be taken away. That night, I was in bed but could not sleep. Around midnight, I heard as if there was a group of people whispering to each other outside our house. At that moment, our newborn started crying. I got up to light a candle so my wife can feed our baby. Just as I light the candle next to our bed, I see hundreds of yellow eyes through the little cracks and holes in the bamboo walls of our house. I can see some of those yellow eyes moving outside our house. So my wife and I listen as if some of those cats, or whatever they were, started getting on the roof of our house. I grab my rifle and aim it directly at the noise on our roof. I fired a shot. Pop! Immediately, the yellow eyes outside our house scattered everywhere, and then they all disappeared into the darkness. I stay up all night watching and making sure my family is okay. When the sun comes up, I fall asleep. I slept all day until late afternoon. When I woke up, I asked my wife, did Jovan come by today? My wife said, "No, nobody's coming today." I got up, opened the door, and went out. I looked around and saw little footprints around my house. Some of those tracks looked like cats. Some looked like footprints of small children. I went back inside and closed our door. Then I asked my wife how she is feeling. I want to know if she is strong enough to travel on foot. She said she feels stronger. I told my wife we were leaving town in the morning. That night, while my wife and I had dinner, our son slept in the guest bed next to our living room. All of a sudden, our son started crying hard. My wife told me to go and take our son to her. I got up and saw there was a purple hand from outside the bamboo wall of the house trying to grab our son. Whatever is outside our house has managed to slip its hand through a small gap in the bamboo wall to grab our son. I quickly grabbed the cutting knife by the fireplace. I ran to grab our son and snatched him from the purple hand. As I was pulling my son away, the hand managed to grab the small blanket that was still wrapped around my son. I jabbed the purple hand several times with the knife and managed to cut off 2 fingers before the purple hand popped out again. I handed our baby to my frightened wife and grabbed my shotgun to leave. But my wife stopped me. "I didn't want you to come out because if something happened to me, I wouldn't know what to do." When I looked back at the hole in the wall by the guest bed, I saw an eye blinking at us. I aimed my rifle at it and fired a shot. Pop! Whatever was out there got away, pointing fingers at these cats. Our village elders believe that these cats are evil spirits. They think these cats are the reason our people are dying. Every day, someone would suffer from a headache or stomach pain and suddenly die from it. I was hoping the other family would hear the shot and come check on us, but they didn't check us the night before. I don't think they notice us. I don't even know if I'm still in village. Maybe my family is the only ones left. I wasn't sure. That night we locked ourselves in the bedroom. The next morning I kept some food and water in my bag along with 2 blankets. I take my rifle and my wife has brought our son. Before leaving the village, we went to the other family's house. I just want to inform Jovan and his family about what happened last night. When we arrived, I knocked on his door several times, but no one answered. I tried to open the door and noticed it wasn't locked. I told my wife to wait outside. When I entered his house, I noticed some of his stuff and blankets rolled up in the corner of his living room. Apparently, Jovan and his family had already left, but I wonder why they didn't take their things. It's like they left in a hurry or something. Then I noticed a strange and unpleasant smell coming from his family's bedroom. I went to open the bedroom door. Inside was his grandfather's body. I noticed his grandfather's right hand looked bloody and 2 fingers were missing. I quickly closed the bedroom door and left the house. I told my wife we have to go as we are the only family left in the village. It took almost a full day to walk to the next village. We don't know what happened to Jovan and his family. That concludes our story. It serves as a reminder that sometimes there are things in this world that we cannot explain or understand. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.
Welcome to our channel. Today's story is about Two World. What would you do if you woke up one day and couldn't remember anything about your life? That's exactly what happened to the woman in this story. She woke up in her husband's arms with no recollection of who he was or who she was. All she knew was that he claimed to be her husband and they had 2 little girls together. Let's begin. The Two World. The spirit and the living. I don't remember what happened. I only remember waking up in my husband's arms. He smiled at me and kissed me on the forehead. I asked my husband who he was and he just smiled and said, "It's me. I am your husband." You do not remember? I'm sorry, I don't remember marrying him. But his soft, reassuring, caring voice somehow made me believe he was really my husband. I looked at the side of the bed and saw 2 beautiful girls. My husband said, "They are our 2 little daughters. Do you still remember their names?" I told my husband I can't remember their names. I don't even remember his name. My husband told me his name is Jim. Our eldest daughter is Sarah and second daughter is Jenny. I touched my daughter's face. They look like me and my husband. My husband lifted me up to sit on the edge of the bed. They were giving me rice porridge. As I ate, I cried and pulled my daughter's head towards me to sniff and kiss. I asked them what was wrong with me as I don't remember anything. I'm like a newborn baby. I don't remember anyone or anyone. My husband, Jim, told me that maybe in a few days I'll start remembering again. He starts telling me we've been married for 7 years. We have 2 daughters, Sarah and Jenny. We live in a small town with other people. Our parents were all killed in the war. My husband asked me if I know I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. There are so many men who would bring their cattle, gold and silver to our house to ask for my hand. Even though I'm already married to my husband, other men still love me. After listening to my husband for a few days, I began to recall my past with my husband and our 2 young daughters. After living with my husband for a while, I noticed some men bringing their cattle and lots of money to our house to trade with my husband. All they want is me. But all those times, my husband never wanted to trade me for anything. He loves me so much. Jim and I are poor. If he gives me away, he'll get rich with lots of money and livestock, but he loves me so much that he never wants to trade me for anything. I told my husband one day that I'm starting to remember things after listening to him. But I still don't remember what happened to me. Why didn't I remember what happened to me? Jim told me we were farming and it was hot. I didn't drink much water, so I passed out. I fell and hit my head hard on a tree trunk. That's how I passed out, and I don't remember anything. Right after Jim told me, someone knocked on our door. He went to open the door and there were 3 men. They brought a lot of money, a chicken and a cow. They wanted my husband to trade me for his money and animals. But my husband told them that I would not give up on them. After that, my husband closed the door and the men left our village. A few days later, Jim told me to stay home. He and our 2 daughters will go to another city to invite a shaman to do a ritual for me and change my name. I asked why. Why change my name too? Jim said, you passed out and didn't respond for a few days. You have to change your name just in case. Before my husband and daughters left, he told me to stay home. He doesn't want me to farm or do housework. He doesn't want you to lose consciousness again. Jim packed me some food for the day before leaving the city with our 2 daughters. At around 2 p.m., Jim and my daughters returned to our village with a shaman. The shaman performed a ritual until after dark. I changed my name from Caroline to Jennifer. My husband loves me and my 2 daughters very much. Most of the time he farmed alone, leaving me at home with our 2 daughters. He farmed all day while I stayed home and took care of our 2 daughters. But when I came home, he was the one who gave me a massage and sometimes sang to me. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes he went to the farm. After a while, I thought I'd stay away. But he only came back to tell me he's gone in between and he misses me already. That's why he came back to see me and he kisses me before returning. Even though we are poor, he is a perfect husband. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Living with him every day is like falling in love again. Some days, she would ask Sarah and Jenny to come with him to the farm to help him. He would leave our 2 daughters at the farm and come home to me. I kept telling him not to because Sarah and Jenny are still very young. He kept telling me the farm isn't too far away. One day, just at sunset, my husband and daughters were at the farm. 3 men came to our city and started knocking on our door. I opened the door and it was an older man and 2 younger ones. They carried purses of gold and silver along with 2 pigs. The old man asked me if I'm Caroline. I told him my name is Jennifer, but in the past I am Caroline. Then the old man said, "Oh, that's why we couldn't find you. Why did you change your name?" I told them if they are bringing animals, gold and silver to ask for my hand, then I will not accept. My husband will never trade me for his animals, gold and silver. The old man said, "No, daughter. We are not here to do that. We are here to bring you and your husband gold, silver and cattle because we are your relatives. I'm your uncle. It's hard to see you and your husband so poor. We're just here to help you." The old man asked if they could enter. I told him my husband and daughters are not at home. But it's getting dark already, so they should be home soon. I let the 3 men into our house. They tied their 2 pigs outside. I gave them chairs so they can sit down after a long journey in our city. The old man told me he's my older uncle. He wanted to take me back to his village. The city of him is the city where I come from. The old man told me that my family is worried about me and that I have to go back. I told them they should go first. When Jim comes back, I'll ask Jim to come with me. The old man said I have to go with them. They can't wait for my husband to come back. He told me my parents are very worried. I refused to go with them. Still, the old man looks familiar. I feel like I know him somewhere, but I don't even know who he is. I don't know why he told me he was my uncle. I also don't know the two young men who came with him. I've never seen those two young men before. I don't believe it, and I think they just want to marry me like other men, so the old man told me it's okay if I don't want to go with them. The old man took a large taro leaf out of his bag. He made 2 holes in the taro leaf. He said it's fine if I don't want to go with them. But he said when my husband and daughters came back, I only watched my husband and 2 daughters toss the 2 holes of the taro leaves. He said that after I do that, even if I don't want to go with them, they won't force me to go. Once the sun has set, I look through the holes in our house and see my husband with Sarah and Jenny walking towards our house. The old man told me to cover my face with the taro leaf and look through the holes. I covered my face with the blade and looked through the 2 holes. My husband was a walking corpse with a twisted neck. My 2 daughters were small little long-haired troll with bandy arms and legs. I see them walking towards our house. I took the paper out and looked at them again, and they appear to be normal looking. I put the sheet back and look again, and all 3 are scary. I looked around our city with the sheet on, and there were no people. All the houses were old and broken. When I take off the sheet, I see beautiful houses and people in the village. I turned to the old man with tears in my eyes. The old man said, "My daughter, you are not dead yet. You have a family at home. You have a husband at home who is still waiting for you. Come with me and I will take you back. You can no longer stay here. You're not dead yet." The old man held out his hand. I was about to take his hand, but I stopped. I took a few steps back and shook my head. At that moment, I remember everything. This old man is really my uncle. He is a strong shaman, but he lives far away. I remember my life of the living. He said, "Caroline, after what you've seen, do you still refuse to come with us?" I told him I don't want to go back. My uncle came and just took my hand. The 2 young men went and hid by the door. I saw my uncle draw his shaman sword. When Jim and my 2 daughters reached the gate, the 2 young men grabbed my husband and my uncle pointed his sword at him. My uncle told Jim, "We are here to get our daughter back. We will give you these gold and silver coins with the 2 pigs outside, but you must not follow us." My uncle took me out and it was already dark. Then suddenly it got very windy. I saw a white horse with wings that came from the sky and landed next to us. My uncle got me on the horse and then got on and sat down behind me. The 2 men released my husband and they both turned into 2 white lights flying forward. The horse follows the 2 white lights. I looked back and saw tears running down my husband's eyes. As we flew, I saw long shadowy black arms reaching out towards us. My uncle told me to close my eyes so as not to be afraid. He said don't open your eyes until he tells me. I closed my eyes and listened to our surroundings. I hear a girl crying as if she is very sad. My uncle kept reminding me not to open my eyes. I feel the wind on my face. I hear a man crying and it seems he is still waiting for his wife. I can hear that man saying something like, "How long do I have to wait here, wife?" He must be a spirit who is still waiting for his wife. I hear that man crying and saying things as our horse passes him. Then I heard a newborn baby cry. I can't hold back the tears. It made me miss my 2 daughters, Sarah and Jenny. I can't help myself, so I open my eyes and see a baby floating in the air and crying. My uncle covered my eyes with his hands. He told me to keep my eyes closed because if I don't, we might not go home. He wanted me to keep my eyes closed until he said I could open them. After flying for a while, all the crying and mourning has started to fade away until I can't hear it anymore. That's when my uncle said I could open my eyes. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mother, grandmother, and husband next to my bed. That's the end of our story for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more interesting stories. We'll see you in the next one.
Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to share with you my paranormal story. I experienced a strange occurrence that involved the Hmong culture's belief in spirits and lost souls. Our Hmong culture holds a belief in spirits and lost souls that refuse to die. I have heard a lot of accounts of people going through strange experiences, but I haven't personally. It all began when I was a shaman at the time, and he was a Catholic. Considering that we each reside in a different town, we had a long-distance relationship. Even though he still visits me every weekend, it takes 3 hours to travel from his town to mine. He'd arrive on a Friday night and depart on a Sunday afternoon. He showed up around 7 o'clock. He planned to remain with me until after midnight. He wanted to return home and try to sleep for at least an hour before heading to work because he started work at 7 in the morning. We were both watching a movie on the floor that night, and as it got close to midnight, I made the decision to prepare something for him to eat before we parted ways because I didn't want him to stop anywhere to get food given how late it was. He was still on his back in the living room floor, which I could see from the kitchen. He had his eyes closed and was facing the ceilings. He would open his eyes, give me a quick glance, and then close them again. I approached him and sat down next to him. I stared at him, even though it appeared he was sleeping because it appeared he was looking at me. Later, I realized his eyes were not completely closed. I kept staring at him while I was sitting there. Then, despite the fact that his eyes were shifting, he appeared to be looking at me before he abruptly yelled, "Help me," with a weak, quiet voice that made it sound as though he was having trouble breathing. He jumped up as quickly as he could, started swearing, and raised his fist in the air when I became scared and smacked him in the face. He was struggling to breathe because he was breathing so forcefully. Finally, after he'd stopped freaking out, I asked him what the eye thing and the whole thing was about. He questions me as to why I didn't wake him up. He replied, "I was giving you signals with my eyes," to which I said, "How was I supposed to know you wanted me to wake you? I'm confused and don't understand anything you're saying." He claimed that he opened his eyes and saw me when I came over. I kept doing that, and eventually he realized it was me. However, when he opened his eyes the last time, expecting to see me, he saw me sitting next to him, staring at him. Even though he cannot see anything, he tried desperately to move but was unable to, so he tried to signal to me with his eyes. But I didn't catch it. He tried so hard and finally could say, "Help me." When he told me, I became extremely frightened. I had goosebumps all over my arms and neck at that very moment, and I felt strange. I had the impression that my soul had left my body. We made the decision to leave and head to my mother's house. It appeared that someone was still inside my apartment when I was standing outside and looking inside. The feeling I had about my home was new to me. I had a sudden, overwhelming sense of sadness, as if someone had come into my house and taken control. We told my mother what had happened when we got there, but like all Hmong parents, she dismissed it as nothing and advised us not to worry about it too much. It was way past midnight, so soon after that, he kisses me goodbye and left for home. I have feared returning home ever since that day. I spent almost a month living with my mother. I would go to my apartment during the day to get what I need, accompanied by my mother, and made the decision to return home one day because I was starting to feel homesick. I gathered my belongings and left for home. I stood by the door when I first entered my apartment and took a look around. The world seemed to be functioning normally. I didn't feel afraid, and I simply felt at home. I set up my belongings, turned on the TV, and sat down on my couch. I didn't experience any strangeness at all. Perhaps it's just that I miss my house too much. After that, everything resumed being fine. He always tells me that he feels like we are not the only ones in my apartment. At that point, I had stopped being afraid of it and had simply dismissed it as a bad dream. I don't feel anything, so I was starting to get upset when he said that. Since he kept feeling that way, we decided to go and stay at my mom's house whenever he came over. A few days later, I discussed it with some of my friends, and they suggested that perhaps it was because I am a shaman and he is a Catholic. And as shamans, we believe in ghosts and other strange things. The ghosts nearby may not like him because he was a Catholic and they were trying to frighten him, but not me because I'm a shaman. It's strange that occasionally it still happens to him now that we are married. Every time we go to bed, I have to make sure my feet are close to his feet in case it happens. When it happens, he isn't able to move his body, but is still able to move his feet. With his feet next to mine, I can feel when he moves. I'd be awakened by it, and he would be awakened by it, and he would be awakened by me. When it occurs, he always awakens to very labored breathing. It's also strange how everything is so contrary to what we believe and expect it to be. In my culture, we think that shamans are more likely to have such experiences than Catholics because they have been baptized, which prevents ghosts from approaching them. This story illustrates the cultural differences and beliefs that can sometimes cause friction between individuals, and how sometimes we need to learn to live with the unknown and the unexplainable. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing the story. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had any such experiences. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more such content.